definitely been a completely new experience. I think, a couple things come to mind. One is when you're starting with a brand new team, I think you have to take some time to create those personal connections and relationships. And those don't always happen over your one-on-one on Zoom. And, you miss some of those, like, chats at the water cooler, or times to go grab coffee, or, times where you get to chat after a meeting and you're like, what was that all about? Those moments are a little bit harder to have when you're on Zoom. And so I think making time for some of those personal connections, understanding how people are feeling, how people are doing, what's going on in their lives outside of this little square that's on your screen, I think is incredibly important. I think the second thing is, like, we all have to give ourselves a little bit of grace. Like, this is the first time any of us are having to go through this, like, starting a new job without ever meeting anyone, everyone's going through, a lot of emotions in terms of the way that the past 18 months have gone. It's been great for some, it's been really challenging for others. And so I think you just have to say, this is a whole new world and we're going to have to hold hands and work on this together. And then I think the last piece is, like, leading on teams. Joining any organization, especially coming into leadership, you've got this amazingly smart group of people that are working on your team. And I think giving yourself the ability to learn from them is incredibly important. Don't come in and try to change the world overnight. I don't think that's what you were hired for. There are amazingly smart people there who have been doing great work. So how do you make sure that you're harnessing that and then bringing your spin to it when the time is right?
Yes, first, do no harm. The Hippocratic Oath is applicable to every profession, when you're starting a new job. I absolutely agree. So now, as you mentioned, we're 18 months into this remote work experiment. And I think back to those days when we said goodbye at the office and we thought we'd be back in 2 weeks. And next thing you know, it's 18 months later. So looking back, at this whole time period, how would you now compare what you're seeing for your team's productivity, both in just general productivity levels and also like effectiveness, quality, creativity, what they're able to do remote versus what you were able to do in person? Any difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, the teams have been so productive. I mean, when you think about now having this opportunity to potentially give up some of that commute time, and people were spending, 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours each way, getting to where they need to go, and now have a little bit more of that think time and focus, like, you do see more productivity. There's good and bad to that, because sometimes it also leads to, like, a little bit feeling like you're always constantly working. So finding that balance, I think, is incredibly critical. I think the second piece is effectiveness seems to be really strong. And we're seeing just amazing work come from the teams and better collaboration, because you don't have that opportunity where someone doesn't feel like they're in the room. Now, thanks to this more remote world, especially working on global teams, everyone has the opportunity now to be together, and we're able to speak the same language, and we're all in the same room, and it doesn't feel like someone's being left out, which I think is something I would want to make sure that we can continue as we move forward.
Yeah. And, another thing that's different is, with us all being mostly home, we're connected a lot more, away from our desks. We're, on our devices, we're consuming a lot more content. Is there anything you're seeing about how your team is just different, like you're different, I'm different, that you're feeling like is actually an advantage for a marketer above what we used to be like in our day-to-day?
Yeah, this is probably an area where I would say, I don't think there's an advantage in this world, but I'm going to caveat that because the whole world had to stop. And so we're all kind of in the same place and trying to figure things out. But I do think as marketers, it's really important to get out and see the world. You have to be in market. You have to understand what consumers are doing. Because no one has been doing anything for 18 months, it's allowed us all to bring a different level of creativity to our work. But I think as we get out and hopefully start to see some of that change happen, I think it really is important to go understand, like, what is your consumer doing? Like, for me, I want to see, talk to drivers. I want to see, spend more time in restaurants. I want to be able to go understand, how our business looks around the world. And that's really hard to do and understand when you're only doing it through a Zoom presentation or a slide deck.
Yeah. Shivram, if you ever need a customer point of view, you can always call me, because I'm arguably overusing Uber services.
No, I love it, and I appreciate it. And I'll slide that 20 over later. That's great.
Okay, so I'm actually recently back to work. I'm in at least 3 days a week now, which is a big adjustment, even though it used to be 5, and now 3 really, has been a big change. How are you and the team at Uber, thinking about starting to bring employees back to work?
Yeah, we've got, we've created a hybrid approach that we're looking at, and we'll all be going back to the offices in mid-January as of right now. And I think, one, there's been a clear understanding that our team is looking for flexibility. They appreciate the opportunity to be able to spend more time at home, get a little bit more flexibility with families. Having the ability to travel, potentially even work from other places is really important and gives people more of a chance to explore, I think, the world, but also feel like they can do their jobs, which is great. I do think as we start to move forward and as people start getting more comfortable coming back into the office, it is going to be important to probably set some, small ground rules in terms of there may be a day or two a week where it makes sense to bring your teams in to help foster that collaboration. If everyone's coming in on different days, it might be a little bit more challenging, but as there are big meetings and brainstorms and things like that, I think teams are really smart and people are really great to be able to say, yeah, these days make sense. We should be able to come into the office. And then any other time, use your own judgment and bring that flexibility to your life. I think we're all adults and we need to be really smart and capable people. And, you're doing great work. Awesome. I don't need to have my eyes on you at all times. At least that's my personal opinion.
Yes, everybody's certainly proven they can do the job virtually. There's no longer a question.
Totally.
So what about you personally, Shivram? We both have kids. I learned, last week when we spoke, what, when you go back to work, are you thinking of doing differently with work-life balance, if any?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I have really appreciated having more time with my kids. I think it's been nice that I'm able to drop them off at school or pick them up when necessary. I tried to block out some time in the afternoons to take them outside and play basketball or just go hang out in the backyard. Even if they're just running around the house, it's just nice to see them and I get more time with them than I think I've ever had before. I think the second thing is I do like to travel for work, but I'm trying to be smarter about when the right time or when it's the right time to travel and whether some of that travel is worth it. There are a lot of times where you've gone for a day or 2 days and there's one meeting and you needed to make it happen. And now I think we've moved to a place where if there's relationship building or if it's really important or if you need to go see something, that travel makes sense. But there are going to be other times where you might say, you know what, I can actually do this over Zoom or we can connect in other ways. So I think it'll bring a lot more flexibility to the ways that we work.
It sounds good to me too.
Yeah. But sometimes you do need that, hey, it's time for me to go. I got to go catch up with some folks. So I can't argue with that either.
Got to close the door and lock it sometimes.
Totally.
So, switching gears a little bit to just the work, that we've done in 2021. It's been an in-between kind of year. I think we all hoped we would be post-COVID, by now and everything back to normal. But we're still kind of in uncertainty. And as we've moved through the year, all of our marketing plans have had to be flexible and the rug's gotten pulled out from all of us, multiple times again, not as bad as 2020, but, still dealing with a lot of uncertainty. How did you approach figuring out how to make, significant high impact investments while dealing, with this uncertainty while you move forward?
Yeah, I think one, making sure that we were building plans with flexibility was critical. Understanding we're going to be looking at making some, big media investments, making sponsorship investments, partnership investments, understanding the flexibility on when they would need to go live and, what assets we would use when we promote them. Whether we might stagger some of those launches to make sure that we're being really clear with the way that we can work with our partners, depending on the situation they're in and the region they're in, I think has been really critical. Also, understanding your consumer and knowing who you're targeting and trying to find those ways to go maximize your business. On the Uber Eats side, we have a new partnership with the NFL this year, which is really exciting. And that for us was important, not only from making an investment standpoint, but also because that gives us a whole new segment of consumers to be able to target. And then we're able to leverage a growing part of our business, which is delivery, which was something that we could also look at to say, hey, depending on where we are in the span of COVID, we either can lean in a little bit heavier or pull back more, depending on how we want to invest in media spend and things like that. So we had a little bit of flexibility, but we've been super excited at the way we've been able to launch. And we've got so much more coming up over the next couple months, especially during the season.
That's really neat. I'm not an NFL person, so unfortunately, I haven't seen this campaign. Can you describe a little bit more for everybody who may be like me that's watching about
Yeah.
how the campaign works and how you built it flexibly?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big opportunities that we're focused on from a business perspective is continuing to show that Uber Eats is more than just online food delivery. We're actually moving into new areas of delivery, including grocery, alcohol, and convenience. And so we use this opportunity with our partnership with the NFL to not just, throw an ad together and put it on during the games, but actually connect back to NFL fandom and fan culture. So we found a way to create, these new ad campaigns that focus on ex-players or super fans or broadcasters, people that if you love the NFL, and you will get the reference and understand the joke and where we're coming from with those ads. And we've actually created a couple of them that are going to be launching throughout the season to A, create some buzz and excitement, and then B, continue to showcase how we know the NFL better than anyone.
Well, I might have to tune into a few games just for you.
Absolutely. We're excited. And I can't wait for you to hear what you thought about it.
So my next question, you may have just answered it, but I was going to ask you, like, of all of the things you've accomplished, you and your team, together over this past year, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, so much. This was a year of our first Super Bowl spot with our Wayne's World ad for Uber Eats, which was amazing. We partnered with Amex and we launched new Eats Pass benefits across their Rose Gold card, which was great. We've done a big deal with Marriott where you actually can link your accounts and get Uber Eats points as well as Marriott Bonvoy points on your purchases, especially as you're starting to get back into travel, which has been really cool. We've signed deals with the Dodgers and the Yankees, and you can actually order on your app to get food at the stadiums, which is a really fun way for us to help connect back to our consumers, but also get our app into more consumers' hands. And so these are just a few of the things, not to mention we just won Adweek's Best Media Plan of the Year for our campaigns from 2020, which again, like huge kudos to my media team that has done just amazing work, continuing to push the boundaries on how we can think about media placement and channel usage. And so it's been a great year so far.
Wow, that's really incredible. Congratulations. And it sure doesn't seem that working virtually has held you guys back at all. Well done.
we're cranking, we're firing on all cylinders, making sure that we're continuing to move the business forward, continuing to make sure we're focused on what's important to our consumers, and then also like how we can help our communities.
Yes. But, as we all know, it's never all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes we win and sometimes we learn something. So is there anything you look back on from the year that you learned an important lesson, maybe something that you're carrying forward into your plans for 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. I think prioritization is so important. We've got great teams and we have passionate people, and we're always looking at how we can do something amazing and cool and innovative and in so many countries around the world. And what that does is it gets a lot of projects running at the same time. And sometimes you need to take a step back and say, hey, should we be working on all of these? Are we devoting the right resources to each of these, different business levers that we need to pull? And is that going to be the strongest impact for us on the business and the brand? And we have to have some tough conversations to say, hey, we're actually going to pull back in these areas because we can move that over and focus on something that's going to be even more impactful. And I think that's something I want to do more of in 2022 is, the fewer, bigger, better model.
Awesome. I completely concur with this lesson learned, that sometimes we all have to learn this over and over again. We get too excited about all of our different projects and ideas, but it's never wrong to prioritize.
Exactly. It's exactly it. You feel like, the dog from the movie Up. You're like, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. And you're just always looking at what's coming new, but like, you have to make sure you've got focus on what's most important.
Yes, it's often hard to choose between all of our children, but we have to.
Exactly. Well, we love all of you.
So, shifting into 2022, at this point in the year, every marketer, including us, is deep in the hysteria of 2022 planning. So this is going to be our second year kicking off the whole process and going through it completely in the middle of a pandemic and facing all of this uncertainty as we've been discussing. Is there anything you're approaching differently round two than you did round one for 2021 planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, I'm watching my gray hair a lot closer this year than I did last year. I think the first thing we're looking at is also just, again, building that flexibility into our plans and looking at, okay, here's our entry level scenario, and here's what an optimal scenario would look like, and building against that, especially when we look at budgets, because we know that things are still coming back into recovery in many of our markets, and we have to be conscious of what's right for not only the country or the consumer, and not jumping into it too early where you're like, hey, get back out and travel, and they're not there yet. And so we want to be conscious of how we position our marketing and communications and where we need to ramp up. I think the second thing is you're starting to see, right, the shift from a lot of traditional media methods to more digital media methods, and like how we think about our media spend and being a lot more conscious of like where we're investing those dollars as we move forward, I think is going to be really important. And then the third piece is, right, how do we leverage our product and our technology? I think we've got an amazing product, and like the more that we can showcase those innovative features and like why you need to use them and the benefits of that through our communications and marketing, we'll continue to showcase like the reasons why you need to choose hopefully Uber Eats over anyone else.
Yeah, and I loved what you were saying about being so thoughtful about the readiness of consumers for different types of messaging, across all of the markets that you serve, since your job is global. At Zeta, on our marketing platform, we can actually look across what consumers are doing in the wild web, what they're searching for, how they're booking, purchasing differently. And we're definitely seeing a tale of two cities, developing as well, with the US consumer very much, shifting over to some kind of a YOLO mentality where, they've just waited long enough. They're starting to throw money around all over the place, making like very significant, travel purchases, lots of intent for next year, lots of intent signals for holiday shopping, much more, than last year. Tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing for the Uber customer.
Yeah, I think for us on the Uber side of the business, very similarly, we're seeing, there's a few countries who have basically said, we're ready to move past this idea of the pandemic, where don't talk to us about it. I don't want to see commercials talking about how challenging of a year it was. We've been through that. We're ready to start having basically the conversation around what this new normal looks like as we move forward. And then there's a set of countries that is still, unfortunately being very much ravaged by the pandemic and is not ready. And, we want to be very conscious of how we have our communications in those markets, because the last thing you want to do is feel disingenuous telling people to now go out and move, or to participate on the platform when like they're still trying to figure out, can we get vaccines? Like, are we feeling safe? Like, is it the right thing for us to do to move? And then there's other places where, we've seen actually where they actually were able to fare through the pandemic pretty well, and we're able to balance and manage over the course of time. And so it's almost like looking into a crystal ball of what the future might look like. So how do we leverage those markets to help gain insights that are going to help push us in the other regions?
Yeah, and I didn't touch on this earlier when we were talking about managing global teams. So what you're explaining about needing to empathize differently with consumers in different countries based on what they're going through, it's also something that's important for us to keep top of mind when we manage global teams.
Yeah.
At Zeta, we actually established our own vaccine in office. We've been giving vaccines in office in our India offices because we realized that our employees here were all getting vaccinated, and it was much more difficult for our employees and their families and our partners in India. So we've been trying to do what we can for both our customers, and our employees, and it's important to manage both constituents.
Absolutely, especially even just thinking about the return to office. Different countries are in different places as a part of that, so you want to make sure people feel very safe and comfortable being able to come back in, depending on the situation. And to your point, like vaccination rates and availability and safety in each region.
Yeah. And so what about budget levels as you think about 2022? We all went to zero. It was devastating. All of our babies got canceled that year. It wasn't even in our hands, to choose. This year, most of us were working with less, than usual as a way to navigate through the uncertainty. How are you approaching 2022?
Yeah, I think we're taking a conservative approach to 2022, and basically being able to say, look, we know we need X amount in many of our regions in order to be successful. And we're picking and choosing a few places where we're going to say, you know what, we actually need to double down on our investment here because there's a huge growth opportunity depending on the region or the country or the market, and you know, the business line. And so, you know, being smart with our dollars, I think, is what's the most important thing. We've learned over the course of the past 2 years, like really using measurement on like what's effective and what's not, and getting smarter with the way that we invest. So that's one piece that I think has been incredibly important. And then the second is, you know, moving past this idea that having big media budgets and dollars are the only way to do marketing, you know, and I think being good stewards of the business, we have to look at how do we make sure that we're investing and always driving that top line awareness for our brand, but getting really smart with our own channels, especially as we have millions of consumers around the world that are using the platform. How can we make sure that we're leveraging those mediums to be able to have much smarter conversations, especially when you think about CRM and like segmentation and understanding who we're talking to? We can do we can play a huge role in that space, and then make sure that we're maximizing the breadth of our platform with our own consumers.
So if you were comparing your channel mix to 2019, you say you're doing significantly more in owned channels as a result of everything, you know, we've learned over the last 18 months?
I don't know if I would say significantly more, but I think we want to. I mean, there's a huge opportunity for us to like think about, you know, from our brand perspective, we have people who are riders on the platform. We have people who are eaters on the platform. We've also just had new acquisitions as a part of our group, including Postmates, including Drizzly most recently, and Corner Shop. So how are we looking at our consumer as like a one consumer lens and starting to think about, hey, if you ride and don't eat, how do I make sure that I'm connecting those two and showcasing to you the power of Uber Eats and the platform? If you use Uber Eats and you use Uber, how do I get you to become a member? And how do I get you to think about membership as a benefit to now having everything in one place on a super app? So those are the kind of conversations that we can have to continue to have internally, and then make sure that the consumer starts to see those benefits on a broader scale.
That sounds great. So would your 2022 plan have greater investments in marketing technology to help you achieve this vision? Or do you feel like yesterday's technology has already got you in a good place?
No, I mean, I think, you know, luckily working for a tech company, we always have to be investing in marketing technology. And you know, that comes from, I think, a couple of different places. One is always looking at like our own internal tech stack and understanding what are the right places for us to be able to invest. The second is in our app and making sure that we've got the right product features that are continuing to innovate and make our consumers' lives even easier. And then the third is going to be on measurement. Like, you know, we're investing more money, so we need to make sure that we understand, are we actually generating that return on investment and that value out of it? And what are the right ways for us to tie that back to either our brand health trackers or through the funnel?
Can you describe a little bit, Shivram, how you set up like a test and learn discipline across your team to make sure that everybody is thinking about continuous improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that honestly we can do even more on, I think, from a marketing perspective, because we generally think of these like big marketing campaigns, and you know, you've got full teams structured towards it, and you're working on big investments, and you know, you're setting up this like 6-month project. What we're trying to do now is look at, okay, for these new areas that we're looking to get into or new technology that we're looking to bring into place, how do we start thinking about some of our regions or some of our markets as test beds for us, where we might do faster test and learn opportunities, take a smaller team and basically make it like a strike team that's working on, you've got 6 weeks, let's try to build something out and work on this quickly. Let us remove any obstacles from you, and then also take away some of your like day-to-day work, so you can create focus on this. And if this is successful, then let's use this model very quickly across 1, 2, 3, 70 countries, and be able to scale. So I want to be able to do more of that in 2022. And that's what we're looking at, how we think about our planning process to include time, budget, space, you know, and capabilities to be able to go do more of that testing.
So we've gotten in a few questions from our very engaged audience. That's
Yeah.
So happy, you know, to learn more about you and your team. So I've got one about sports. How important is the sports consumer as part of your overall marketing plan? And if it's important, particularly for Uber Eats as mentioned, How do you plan to reach this coveted audience? Because lots of people, are going after this audience.
Yeah, I think, one, I would say sports plays a role in two ways. One, which is on the media side of things, it's one of the few places where people still watch live. And so when you're watching live, that means you have that audience that you can reach out to that is in real time, as opposed to many of our time shifted methods of media that people use today. The second piece is it's also an opportunity for us, especially as we're still building awareness and trial in our category in many of our markets around the world, to get those first-time users to our platform. And what we've seen is in a lot of our league partnerships, as well as in our team deals or stadium partnerships, we're not only looking at this as sponsoring a team, which is a nice benefit out of it, but also being able to find those ways to incorporate our technology into those stadiums so that you need to take an Uber to get to the stadium. And then once you get in the stadium, you get to use Uber Eats to order your meals. Like, we become a much easier one-stop solution, and it helps introduce our brand to new consumers that haven't been a part of the platform before. So both of those things end up helping us in major ways to help reach new consumers and get them to try our platform and see those benefits. So hopefully you got your Dodger dog in LA and then with Postmates, and then you came home and you ordered Postmates, as soon as you got back to your house.
Nice. So question about the competitive environment for Uber. How much of you and your team's mind share do you spend, watching what the competition is doing, how they're running promotions, pricing, et cetera? There's a lot going on. So talk to us a little bit about how you approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say there is, like, we have to be focused on our own game most importantly, and understand what we're trying to achieve from a strategic standpoint and a business standpoint. That doesn't mean you can ignore what's happening in the marketplace, and you need to understand it. I like to use the opportunity to basically blunt the competitors where we can. So when we understand that, hey, we own this marketplace, how are we going to make sure that we're holding on to our share? That's a lot of the work that we do. Or getting into places where we might say, hey, if you are not the leader in the market, what do you need to do in order to take that market share, and how do we need to invest? I think one of the great things for us with the Uber brand and the Uber name is we've done a really great job building that credibility and equity. And now it's figuring out, how do you continue to leverage that, especially as a platform brand in our markets around the world.
Fantastic. So we've also got in a follow-up question on measurement.
Okay.
So you've talked a little bit, about how your team, uses measurement at the core of all you do, right? To drive continuous improvement. But more specifically, how do you measure the effectiveness of all the awesome media work and partnerships? I love that. And it's true. Some things are easier to measure than others, as we all know. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how you make the KPIs matter.
Yeah, I mean, brand marketing is different than performance marketing. And on the performance marketing side, it's very clear, right? There's ROAS targets and cost per clicks and things like that, where you get these very nice math problems that you can figure out. Brand marketing is a little bit different. You have to look at causal measurement studies for campaigns. We also look at brand health trackers, as well as how we've set up our KPIs for the year and understanding whether our marketing continues to hit on that. If my vision is I want to make sure that consumers see I'm the most reliable brand in the country, then I need to make sure that my advertising is focused on that, and that we're doing the right research and measurement afterwards to be able to showcase that those metrics are moving. We're seeing a rise in, consideration. Are we seeing a rise in preference? Are we seeing a rise in selection, et cetera? So, understanding, one, what are the right KPIs that you want to measure? Two, building out the right frameworks to be able to do that. And then three, knowing that they don't happen overnight. Brand metrics don't move, with the flip of a switch like you can with performance. And you have to make sure that you're building in a little bit of time, which as marketers, we know we have zero patience for, to be able to see how that progresses. Because as you invest money, there's always going to be the question of well, how's it doing? And how's it working? And are we making an impact? And so, not only does that have to come from our measurement studies, but then at the end of the day, how's your business performing?
Yes, and it's not just us that are impatient; it's them.
Yeah. Right? Oh, totally. Yeah. It's you're oh, the campaign's launching tomorrow. You're how'd it do? And we're it hasn't launched yet. well, I need a
It's been an
metric.
hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So for brand metrics, what do you find is the right time horizon to set for how often we go back and check how we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen basically like especially for like media campaigns, you need to be on air at least at a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks to be able to start to see that. We track a lot of our trends on a quarterly basis. And so that helps us at least get a few months of campaign work under our belt where we can start to see the impact. I think anything shorter than that, unless you have a very specific metric that you are looking for and you are investing a ton of money into it, it's a lot harder to tell.
Yeah. And then what about how you manage metrics across your global markets? Do you find that you're able to be, consistent and unified in what you measure, or are there compelling reasons to differentiate the scorecard in each market?
Yeah, I got to shout out our research and insights team. They've done an amazing job, actually, even just as we've gone into this quarter, creating a very standardized methodology for how we look at our campaigns around the world. That was something where each market felt like they were looking at something a little bit different. And then the biggest challenge there was it's hard to come back and look at, okay, what was more effective? And like, are there any learnings that we can take more than anything else? It's less about saying, well, this market did better than this one. It's actually like, well, if this market did better, what can we use from that? We've got, X amount of countries that we're working in around the world. Why not be smart and take the best practices and bring them around? So we've created a much more standardized method. We just did our Q3 reviews, and it was awesome to be able to come back and see, wow, like when you rack and stack these 10 campaigns that we did in each country around the world, this is what actually works. So we're building now like a best practices list that we can share with our marketers, because we want everyone to be able to see, look, if you're trying to drive consideration, here's how you do it, and let's get smart about it. Let's not have 10 different countries try to figure out and reinvent the wheel 10 different times.
Yeah. And how do you make sure that your team, all of your global team, has the platform to showcase their work and kind of take their own little victory laps, when they're the ones at the top of the leaderboard, as you just described?
Yeah, traditionally, like if you're in an office place or things like that, there's meetings and all hands and things like that where you make it a little bit easier. We've been trying to do that, at least on my team, I have a monthly all hands where I make sure like every month we bring up like a new host. So someone from our team to host the meeting rather than hearing me drone on for a long time. And then what are the key initiatives that people want to hear about? And so giving the chance to the team to be able to showcase their wins. I also send out a weekly email to our marketing team that includes like key wins from our team every week. And that helps with, one, getting more visibility for the work that's happening on our team. Two, the ability to shout out the great folks that are doing the work. And then three, helping to share some of those best practices that we have so that, again, if we're doing awesome work in the United States, like I want to share that with Australia, or vice versa, which is if the Australia team does something really cool, let's make sure that we're learning from it.
That's fantastic. And so there's a lot of people, listening to your advice on this call. What's one thing you would recommend to, every marketer that's listening that they take away with them into 2022?
I think, the number one thing I would say as you're coming into 2022 is just, again, I'm going to reiterate the word focus. I think just really understanding what's the number one or one or two priorities you're trying to solve for, and then how do we make sure that we're building our plans and our teams around them. It's so easy for us to have to basically get into this place of fighting through 8 different teams and what are their priorities and what do we want to work on and how do we structure our teams and working through things. And I think just being really simple and really clear and focused at what we want to do, and then being able to communicate that across the organization and have everyone galvanized around that just creates much stronger teams, and it creates focus, and everyone knows what their North Star is. And that's really important, I think, going into next year. Not feeling like we're all so siloed because we've all been working from home for so long, that we're all working towards one goal.
Okay, and last question, because I see Toya came on to take care of us. You mentioned you have not traveled in 18 months. Where are you going to go first?
We've just, it's funny, we just started kicking off. I'm actually heading to San Francisco in a few weeks to meet my team, which is very exciting. We're doing a team meeting, which will be great. And then my family and I finally have planned like our first vacation. And so we're going to be hopefully, depending how things work, and if everything is safe and we can get out there, but we're planning on going to Portugal for Thanksgiving. So I cannot wait.
Better late than never. Sounds like a good one.
Exactly. We've been trapped in these four walls for a long time. So I think it's the best for everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Shivram. Amazing discussion.
No, thank you so much, Crystal. Really appreciate it.
Be focused. I'm taking that with me, Shivram. Focus for 2022. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's got it. I'm going to get it tattooed on me somewhere.
Well, thank you both. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to our speakers, our audience, our sponsors for joining us. We're done with day 3 of the Marketing Leadership Livecast, but Brand Innovators has another day tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. So don't forget to register and have a great night, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.